E. Cummings by Gracie, Olivia, Samantha, and Drew. Edward Elston Cummings was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts on October 14, 1894, to very loving and very happy parents, Edward Cummings and Rebecca Haswell Clark. His mother came from a family of upper-class Cambridge socialites where she had turned out to be a very quiet and artistic girl. She was well educated, despite never attending college. This picture in the PowerPoint was of E. E. Cummings' mother, and it was painted by E. E. Cummings himself in 1941. He was an author and an artist on top of being a poet. His father, the second Edward in the patriarchal line, had a strict Congregationalist as a father who cared for little else besides work. Edward had excelled at Harvard Divinity College before his graduate education in sociology, where he would continue and become an instructor in political economy. He started the first sociology class at Harvard before establishing sociology as an area of study, on his way to becoming an illustrious professor at Harvard by the time his son Edward Elston was born. This photo is a family photo of E. E. Cummings, his father Edward, and his sister Elizabeth, and E. E. Cummings also wrote a poem called Father Dear, and it was dedicated to his father Edward. E. E. Cummings also had a younger sister named Elizabeth Cummings, who later got married and changed her last name to Quayle. She was a significant influence in his life, as they were very close as siblings. The siblings are said to have grown up with supportive parents who encouraged creativity, with their mother playing games and fostering imagination. After her brother's death, she continued his legacy by preserving and donating valuable family papers, including early writings and sketches by E. E. Cummings, to the Massachusetts Historical Society. Elizabeth even went as far to write and keep a memoir of her and her brother's early years in Cambridge, sharing fond childhood memories of circus trips and games. This picture on the presentation is another painting done by Edward Cummings, or E. E. Cummings, of his sister Elizabeth, and this painting is currently being preserved in the Harvard Art Museum. Edward Elston himself was a rather small man, both in stature and size, though his mind was very large. He had always been an artistic man, who loved writing, reading, and painting, enjoying his time at Joy Farm in Silver Lake, New Hampshire, where his family's estate was. Here is where at age 67, on September 3rd, 1962, he would unfortunately suffer from a stroke and would be declared dead at Memorial Hospital in North Conway, New Hampshire. As a young child at the age of 14, in 1907, he attended Cambridge Latin School and very quickly learned of his distaste for the Latin language. His early poems had been full of prose and not very good, to which he would later refer to them as sentimental and melodramatic. In the summer of 1909, Cummings spent most of his time at Joy Farm, where he would write 37 poems, ranging from narrative poems that retell historical events and categories like Songs of the Immortal Soul and Sounds of the Seasons. It's within these 37 poems that Cummings' signature style would be brought to life. Didactic trailings, mature in language and theme, melodrama, and religious undertones that were so heavy they became overtones. Later he would attend Harvard twice, earning a B.A. in 1915 and an M.A. in 1916, concentrating in Greek and English literature. Come September of 1917, Cummings would find himself imprisoned by French authorities while serving as an ambulance driver. He was held for only 3.5 months on suspicion of espionage because of the anti-war sentiments he would write in a letter to his mother. This experience would later be detailed in his autobiographical novel, The Enormous Room, in 1922, followed by his first book of poetry, Tulips and Chimneys, in 1923. The picture we chose to incorporate on this slide is published by the Britannica, and this is of E. E. Cummings in the mid-stages of his life. Throughout his life, there were many factors that influenced the works of E. E. Cummings, from how he grew up to the political climate of his adult life. Cummings is known for his work in poetry and his unique use of syntax and grammar. One of the reasons why it's theorized that E. E. Cummings was dyslexic, this evidence is shown with the way he writes and the fact that his dominant hand is his left hand. Statistically, people who are left-hand dominant are more likely to be dyslexic. If he was dyslexic, that would explain much of why his work is so unique. This evidence is seen in many of his archival papers, with letter reversals, unreadable handwriting, and his papers having a skewed orientation. But it would not be true to say that this was the main influence of his unique use of words and syntax. He was also very much influenced by the literary priorities of early modernism. The literary priorities of early modernism inspired E. E. Cummings to be more experimental with his work and writing, trying new things and breaking traditional literary ways. For example, fragmentation, which is seen in many of E. E. Cummings' works with his unconventional grammar and use of syntax. He was also influenced by modernism in still lifes. E. E. Cummings liked to write like he was in a still life moment, and instead of making it seemingly boring, he was able to invoke it with emotional awareness, breaking up the poem and being unconventional. This is seen in his collection of poems Viva. Throughout this work, it seemed that he liked to take a moment in time and sit in it, digest it with his poetry, and take a mundane moment and make it meaningful. These collections of poems were written before his trip to the USSR, which later influenced his work, I mean. Traveling to the USSR impacted E. E. Cummings greatly, influencing his political views and his later works. While he visited, he saw the movement beautifully fake, something to catch people's eyes, but in reality, it had no meaning. He saw USSR as trying to rip off America's consumerism culture where things have turned cheap and meaningless, but on a more drastic scale. This then influenced his later work of Imi, in which he commented on the state of the USSR. Throughout this work, he still uses his unique, unconventional writing style, but utilized it to critique the USSR. He goes so far as to make it even satirical in some parts, expressing his disappointment with the whole system. The poem that we decided to choose to focus on by E. E. Cummings is titled Since Feeling is First. Since feeling is first, who pays any attention to the syntax of things? Will never wholly kiss you, wholly to be a fool while spring is in the world. My blood approves, and kisses are a better fate than wisdom. Lady, I swear by all the flowers, don't cry. The best gesture of my brain is less than your which eyelids flutter says. We are for each other, then laugh, leaning back in my arms. For life's not a paragraph, and death, I think, is no parentheses. Our analysis of the poem is as follows. The poem that we chose was titled Since Feeling is First. This is one of his more popular romantic poems that he wrote. Not only is it filled with romance, but it is filled with feeling of strength and the power of feeling. It explores the hierarchy between feeling and logic, which should precede the other. This ties into the overall theme of the poem that E. E. Cummings makes very clear at the beginning of the poem. Since feeling is first, who pays attention to the syntax of things? He makes the claim that feeling should preside over logic and knowledge. Not necessarily that life shouldn't have logic in it, but that the human person should care about living life to its fullest feeling, not logic. There are many literary elements that E. E. Cummings uses to achieve this. For example, the speaker is an unknown. may be Cummings himself, but nonetheless the speaker love-struck and enamored by the lady in the poem, ignoring the logic of it all to show her his affection. The tone of this poem is playfully romantic, rebelling against logic as seen by "and kisses are a better fate than wisdom." To further the theme that feeling should take precedence over logic, Cummings uses a lot of sensual language throughout the poem, from "eyelids flutter" to "laugh leaning back in my arms." He compares all these things to the logic of life, and how logic can't even compare to the feelings he experiences for this lady. E. E. Cummings also utilizes various forms of figurative language, like symbolism and metaphors. Some symbols are syntax, spring, and flowers. Syntax, as used in the poem, symbolizes logic and order. So Cummings, because feeling is first, there's no need to pay attention to the logic of it all. Spring represents youth and passion, and Cummings is saying that while there is life and passion, it's worth it to be a fool for love. Flowers is a symbol for beauty and emotional sincerity, and Cummings is using it to emphasize his sincerity of passion to the woman, and that he loved her more than fate and wisdom. The metaphors in this poem, "life's not a paragraph," and "death, I think, is no parentheses." The first metaphor means that life isn't supposed to be neat or logical, but meant to mean something. The second suggests the idea that death is not an interruption, but the end, unlike how a parenthesis doesn't end the sentence, but interrupts it, so life with more feeling and romance. All these literary devices emphasize the theme of the whole poem, that feeling should take precedence of logic and knowledge, that one should follow their heart, even if it is not the most logical choice.